These days, lobster is synonymous with luxury, something not everyone can afford to indulge in. But few realize that around 200 years ago, lobster was a dish people loathed. Even in America, it was used as fertilizer, fed to pigs, and even served to prisoners daily. In fact, prisoners even rioted because they were forced to eat so much lobster. It might sound like a joke, but this story originates from the 17th to 19th centuries in New England. New England, the northeastern region of the United States, is where lobster was once called sea cockroaches. Back then, New England was overflowing with lobsters. After storms, hundreds would be washed ashore, lying scattered everywhere. Because lobsters are large, armored, and scuttling about, the locals viewed them as repulsive creatures, not a typical seafood delicacy. Some historical accounts indicate that in the 1600s, children in New England used dried lobster shells as fertilizer for cornfields, while adults ground up lobster remains to use as bait for fishing. It even got to the point where servants who ate lobster had to hide it, fearing they'd be seen as impoverished. In other words, eating lobster back then was like eating sea roaches. People ate it because they couldn't afford pork or beef. The situation reached its peak in the 18th and 19th centuries, particularly in Massachusetts. At that time, the coastline teemed with lobsters. Sometimes, people could simply walk along the beach and collect lobsters by hand. Lobsters were so plentiful that they cost only a penny a pound, making them cheaper than potatoes or bread. Coincidentally, a problem arose in the state's prisons. What could prisoners eat that was both cheap and nutritious? Beef and pork were expensive, while lobsters were abundant off the coast and rich in protein. So, the authorities came up with a seemingly humane idea: feed the prisoners lobster to give them added nutrition. They believed it would save money and improve the prisoners' diets. And so from the mid-19th century in Massachusetts jails, lobster regularly appeared on the prisoners' plates. Boiled lobster, steamed lobster, even lobster porridge. Initially, many inmates found it palatable, but after just a few months of eating lobster every day, they began to grow weary of it. Some even felt insulted, believing the authorities were deliberately tormenting them by forcing them to eat such a lowly food. Eventually, the prisoners collectively revolted, writing petitions and even demanding a strike. A hunger strike, that is. One prisoner even wrote an official letter to the governor, calling lobster food for animals, and requesting that the prison only serve it a maximum of 3 times a week because eating it more often felt degrading. The uproar was so significant that the government had to revise the rules, and by the mid-19th century, a law was passed prohibiting prisoners from being fed lobster too frequently. A real clause in history. This is perhaps one of the most peculiar laws in American history, proving that too much of anything can become tiresome. Ironically, just over half a century later, lobster underwent a complete transformation. With the development of railway transport, fresh seafood began to be transported inland. Chefs discovered that if lobster was prepared correctly, it could have an exquisite flavor. Thus, from a despised food, it rose to become a delicacy for the aristocracy and spread throughout the United States. The laws that once forbade feeding lobster to prisoners became a historical anecdote that makes everyone laugh. So, what caused this prison food to become a 5-star restaurant icon? As railroads connected the states, train companies came up with the idea of transporting seafood from the coast inland and advertising it as a local specialty. Because inland customers didn't know it was once a cheap food on the coast, it was advertised as a New England ocean delicacy, so they ate it and praised its flavor. This created a domino effect. Restaurants inland began ordering lobsters from the coast, cooking them in French or Italian styles with elaborate decorations, and the price of lobster began to skyrocket. From a few cents a pound, it had increased 10-fold to 20-fold by the late 19th century. By the early 20th century, lobster had gradually become a luxury delicacy thanks to the emergence of Hollywood and the American upper class. As movies developed, people saw celebrities, business people, and famous actors eating lobster in lavish scenes. There were golden lights, wine, and butter melting on the red shells of the lobsters. Thus, the image of the old sea roach disappeared, replaced by a symbol of luxury. During World War II, when the US military was short on food supplies, people were encouraged to eat seafood, especially lobster, because it wasn't meat, and meat needed to be supplied to the troops. At this point, Americans had become addicted to the delicious and less restricted lobster. When the war ended, the middle class also began to regard lobster as a very tasty dish. At that time, lobster had climbed onto the banquet table. Interestingly, lobster has a high content of a substance called natural glutamate. This is what creates the umami flavor, or in layman's terms, the savory seafood taste. When lobster is cooked with its shell turning bright red, it releases pigments from the shell. The meat is soft, fragrant, and fatty due to its high content of unsaturated fats. A Japanese chemist named Kikunai Ikeda, who discovered the umami taste, once researched and concluded that lobster is one of the most naturally flavorful seafoods in the world. Thanks to this characteristic, lobster became a favorite ingredient of Michelin chefs, helping it surpass ordinary shrimp or crabs. Ironically, what prisoners once found repulsive is now a specialty, and restaurants often list it as market price because it's so expensive that they don't dare list a fixed price. From prison food to the meal of nobles, it's a spectacular reversal in culinary history, reflecting a rule: something scarce often becomes luxurious. When lobster was plentiful, everyone got tired of it. But as overfishing and urbanization limited coastal areas, lobster became precious. Just as people once considered salt as white gold or coffee as a stimulant, lobster went from being hated to being worshipped. While the United States once considered lobster a sea roach, in Japan, lobster has long been regarded as a symbol of good luck, especially during the New Year. People believe that the curved back of a lobster resembles an elderly person, representing longevity and respect. Lobster often appears in New Year's feasts as a wish for a long life. Today, lobster has become a dish often advertised as luxurious. The rich eat lobster not only because it's delicious, but because it speaks to their status, position, and ability to pay for an expensive menu. Just like the way people refer to champagne, caviar, or black truffles, lobster is associated with the concept of luxury. In Vietnam, the South Central Coast farms thousands of tons of lobster each year, generating trillions of dong in revenue. From food for prisoners and the poor, lobster has become a star on the global banquet table and a testament to how people redefine value. The lobster hasn't changed. It's still a sea creature, still crawling in the ocean. Only people's perspectives have changed. When people become wealthier, when resources become scarcer, when people want to show off, they call it a luxury dish. No food is inherently luxurious or humble. Only time and circumstances cause it to be honored or abandoned. The lobster story is a classic lesson about relative value in our lives. What we disdain today may be a treasure tomorrow. What was once discarded may become so scarce that it is hunted. Lobster is an example, telling a larger story, the story of how mankind evaluates value over time. If we could go back to the late 18th or early 19th century and tell an American prisoner that their descendants would spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to eat lobster, they'd probably laugh in our faces. But history sometimes has such humorous stories. What we once despised becomes what we worship. And lobster, from a sea roach, has become the king of seafood, from prison food to a luxury dish. This is living proof of the saying, nothing is permanently low. People just haven't been perceptive enough to recognize its value yet. Thank you for your interest in following this story. If you found it interesting, you can click the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share it. And now, I'll say goodbye.